very excited to be here with Mari, who is gonna have this or do this webinar with me on content's role in your enterprise SEO strategy. So very exciting topic, something that is near and dear to both of our firms and to a lot of our clients and our audience. So yeah, we're gonna dive into this topic. And well, first I want to introduce myself. So I'm Carlos Meza. I'm the CEO of Crowd Content. We have a freelance content writing platform, and we are very focused on quality content at a scale. So we service many large scale businesses, enterprise businesses, where they need lots and lots of pieces of content at high quality. We've been doing this for now about a decade. So and with that, I want to introduce you to Mari here from Conductor. So Mari, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Awesome. Thanks so much, Carlos. Hi, everyone. My name is Mari Irby. I'm a senior SEO success manager at Conductor. So my role really is to help make sure that customers that are working with Conductor are able to interpret the SEO insights and recommendations that come from the data within our platform, and really just help to educate on all things SEO, content level, as well as how to make your site perform at its best for organic visibility. And just a quick blurb on Conductor: we are an enterprise SEO platform or technology, and we focus on making sure that the power is in our customers' hands to understand exactly how you perform in Google search, as well as opportunities to scale, to improve, as well as support with migrations, which is a big pain point for a lot of people. So we're excited to offer that kind of service. But in a nutshell, that's me and that's Conductor. So Carlos, thanks so much. I'll kick it back over to you.
Thank you, Mari, and welcome again. And thank you to Conductor for accepting our invitation to partner up for this webinar. So, all right, without further ado, let's get into business. And here's our agenda for today. So we're going to talk a little bit about the fundamentals. What is enterprise SEO, on how is just regular SEO different from enterprise SEO, and why is content so important for enterprise SEO. Then we're going to give you a few tips to supercharge your enterprise SEO content, give you an outline for seamless content creation. We're going to talk about how to scale your content production, and also how to avoid some mistakes in enterprise SEO. And if we have enough time, we're going to give you some bonus tips and tricks for growing your organic traffic at a scale. All right, and just some housekeeping. So we have a chat, and you can use the chat to ask questions, and we'll have a Q&A session at the end. So some questions, hopefully for Mari, and some questions for me about scaling your content creation at an enterprise level. All right, so what is enterprise SEO? SEO for enterprise is pretty much SEO for a large website. So all the fundamentals of SEO apply for enterprise SEO, but it is all about a scale. So the key word here is scale. That's what makes SEO for enterprise a little bit different than just normal SEO. So yes, size does matter about enterprise SEO. So it's either your number of pages, right? So anytime that you're in the thousands of pages, so you're likely looking at enterprise SEO, or the size of the company. So of course, if you're a Fortune 500, Fortune 1000, Fortune 2000, you're very likely in front of enterprise SEO. Or if you have a company with 10,000 employees all distributed across the globe, you're likely looking at enterprise SEO. And also the size of the team. So if you have many different teams that have to look after your SEO for your company, for your business, you're likely looking at enterprise SEO. You have a marketing team with smaller teams within your marketing team. You have a legal team, IT team. So the fact that you have many teams looking that have to be involved in your SEO strategy or your SEO execution can make you an enterprise SEO. So for instance, sometimes you might say, well, but we're a small company, we're 30 people, but we have many clients, for instance, in the media publishing business, lead generation, demand generation, that are still enterprise SEO. And the reason being, despite there being a small as a business by headcount, they have thousands of pages because content is their business. So if you fall in one of these three buckets or in a couple of these buckets, you're likely looking at enterprise SEO. So it's very different to have that basic understanding on where you stand in terms of your SEO. So now, what was it different, and what is special, or what characterized enterprise SEO? And we could think of the analogy is like launching a rocket or like moving a cargo ship, right? And what is interesting about that is that sometimes it's very hard to move, right? So it moves at a slower pace. Or it's just harder to move than any other SEO or a small business SEO, right? There are many aspects to it, many things that you need to consider before launching this big rocket around your enterprise SEO. So it's a big endeavor. So any initiative can be a big undertaking, and everything is a scale. Everything is massive. So that's why enterprise SEO is a little bit different. Now, the other interesting thing about enterprise SEO is you have many stakeholders. So collaboration is going to be critical. So you have an IT team that needs to approve or execute on some of these initiatives, that need to support, make some changes on the site, on the pages. Of course, your marketing team is going to be involved, and within the marketing team, you have a lot of mini teams that also have to be part of this. You might have a legal and compliance team, especially when you have a very known brand or a very large corp. Legal has to vet many of the content that you are producing, or you need to run a lot of the stuff through compliance around privacy issues, maybe diversity things. So legal and compliance might be present. PR is going to be sometimes be present as well. You might have just a product team that for different products that the company has. So product team has to be involved. You have procurement, right? If you're using freelancers, if you're outsourcing, you're using vendors, right? You're using different tools. Procurement is going to have to be there, helping you sign those contracts. You might have different divisions, right? So you have a consumer products division, you have a B2B division. So that just brings complexity, right? And brings a lot of cooks in the kitchen. And you know what you say, right? If you have many cooks in the kitchen, the soup can get spoiled. So collaboration is going to be key, and early buy-in is going to be key to be successful in enterprise SEO. The other thing about enterprise SEO is that the stakes are really, really high. And what do I mean by this? So when the stakes are high, because you have so many sites and the traffic is massive, any positive impact can have a massive financial impact on your bottom line. So if you were to increase traffic by 10% because you pull a great SEO initiative on your enterprise, just because of the sheer volume and sheer scale, that might have an incredible impact on your P&L. Now, the flip side of that, if you make a mistake of something doesn't work, or you even let your traffic decay, or some of your pages decay, or you don't pay attention, or you neglect them, the impact can be massive as well, right? If you reduce your leads or your traffic by 10-15%, there might be a massive impact on your bottom line. Now, also, if you're a large brand, there's going to be more scrutiny, right? So there's just going to be many more eyes looking at what you say, what kind of content you produce, and all the things that you do. So any good move can have a major impact. Any false move can have also a major impact. So everything is higher. Also, the expectations from the public are much higher, right? If you're a very well-known brand, the room for error is smaller. The public is not going to be as forgiving as they would be with a small business. So everything is just bigger and have bigger impact. And the project and any initiative is going to require much larger budgets when you compare to a small business. Most projects in enterprise SEO, they start at the 6-figure mark and they can go as high as 7 figures. So everything is bigger in the enterprise world. The other thing to take into account, enterprise SEO is ultra competitive. And why is that? Because there's very large budgets. Like the skill sets of the people you're competing with is much higher, right? And you cannot come with a knife to a gunfight, right? So it's a high contact sport, right? So it's stiff competition, and the budgets and everything is different than if you were competing with a small business SEO. So the tactics that you're going to apply, the budgets have to be according to the competition as well. So who needs enterprise SEO? So again, size matters. So large e-commerce websites, multinational websites with multiple sites across different geos, and business with tons of product or service pages. So here I'll give you some examples to make the concept more palatable. So of course, Walmart, 37.8 million pages. Of course, hundreds of thousands of products, hundreds of thousands of category descriptions. So many pages. So this is a mammoth site, right? Lots going on with the Walmart site. And then you have somebody like Adobe, right? You see only 138,000 only compared to Walmart, but they have many different service offerings, so many service pages as well. And then you can have somebody like Deloitte, right? It's a consulting firm, but they have many, they have a lot of presence in different countries. So brings on another type of complexity, but it's still 300,000 pages. So if you fall in one of those categories, or if your firm looks similar to these ones, you might be facing enterprise SEO. And not only need to be, again, Fortune 500, but it's maybe smaller companies, but with thousands of sites also are going to fall into enterprise SEO. Okay, so again, the difference between SEO and enterprise SEO. So I mentioned a few things already, but it's all about scalability and automation, right? Because everything is bigger, you have to do things many times. So you need to create and develop the right processes that can be scaled and repeated with time. And for that, you might want to think about automation, right? If you're doing internal linking, it's going to be very hard to do manually or to do on a one-by-one basis. If you're a small business, you can get away with manual processes, but some of these things can be automated. So you could write a script to go on and create your internal links on an automated basis. So again, scalability and automation are very important for enterprise SEO. You're going to need different SEO tools. For instance, Conductor, of course, is focused on enterprise. So it's an enterprise focused service, right? So if you're doing enterprise SEO, you want to look for tools that are designed to serve the enterprise. They're designed for a scale. So the tools that can be good for a small business are probably not the same tools that are going to be used for enterprise SEO. I talked about team buy-in because there's so many different teams. You're going to need buy-in early to be able to move your initiatives quickly. Of course, more pages. We talked about that enough. Keyword research and selection. This one is interesting because by being an enterprise and by probably having a very high domain authority, you're going to have the opportunity to go after very highly competitive keywords, right? That a small business cannot afford to go after because domain authority is not there. So there are advantages to be an enterprise around keyword research. Of course, quality content creation at a scale, and that's probably a lot of the meaty topic in this webinar. So I'm not gonna go deep there just yet because Mary's gonna take us there when she comes in. But of course, quality creation, quality content at a scale is very important for enterprise SEO. Unique backlinks opportunity. This is a very interesting one that a small business don't get, and is if your brand is being mentioned around in the web by many other sites, but they're not linking to your site, there is a great opportunity there to get backlinks just by approaching those publications or these other sites that have mentioned your brand, right? If they're already mentioning your brand in their content, they're more likely going to be willing to give you a link or to create a link to your site, right? So they're pretty unique backlink opportunities. You can go and scrape the web or crawl the web, look for those mentions of your brand and ask for those links. And of course, you have marketing teams that are going to be more complex. They're going to be bigger. So sometimes there might be silos. So you have an SEO team, and then you have a separate content creation team, and then you might have a separate technical SEO team, and there needs to be collaboration amongst those teams. So that's very important. And reporting, the need for reporting is going to be higher because there is going to be more teams because the sites are just bigger. You're going to be asked for a different slicing and dicing of the data, and you have many other stakeholders that also want to see the data and the metrics. So the reporting needs are different at a enterprise scale. Now, why content is so important for enterprise SEO? So again, quality content, and like they say in finance, cash is king. Well, in SEO, content is king, right? So you still have to produce quality content for enterprise SEO, but there are certain things that need to be present when you're producing content at enterprise level. One is consistency. Because you have so many pages, it's very important that you're consistent across all these many pages. And this is not easy task when you have 100,000 pages, right? Or 1,000,000 pages. So making sure that all the messaging, the branding, the tone of voice, the style is consistent is something that has to be top of mind, because it's hard to achieve when you have these many pages. Also, the brand voice and style in the same topic, right? So if you have these brand image that has been developed over many years, you need to make sure that everything that you produce is consistent with that brand and with the voice and with your style, right? Whether you have a casual style or more formal style, you need to make sure that everything that you do around your content adheres to that brand and that style. Of course, EAT and the quality expectations are much higher, right? So if you're a very well-known brand, you cannot afford to have a poor quality piece of content, right? The public is going to be less forgiving because you're a known brand, right? The expectations are much higher. Of course, if you're in a vertical where expertise is very important, like let's say medical or financial or something very technical, you might need to have access to SMEs, doctors, lawyers, etc., that can vet the content. So again, the bar for EAT is going to be much higher for the quality produced at an enterprise level. However, by having high domain authority, you can rank probably easier if you have the right quality of your content. Then the channels is very important that you optimize for the different channels, not only for your blog posts and your own site, but also for the social media, also for YouTube. Maybe you have a podcast as well. So it's very important that you also optimize and produce quality content for all the channels, not only one, but across all your channels. Another consideration is languages. Right? If you have a very large site and you have maybe a presence in other countries, or you're catering to different audiences across different geos, so language is something that is going to be important. And it's not going to be just about translating the content, but also localizing the content, right? To fit for culture, customs, idioms, and also the consistency of the brand has to be still across the different languages. So it's very important, right? So you might want to have access to freelancers and editors, and even researchers that are very familiar with the language, or maybe they're native speakers of the language, right? So that's their first language, because it's not only about the translation, but also localizing the content and have that intimate knowledge of the language. And again, just all content rules apply to enterprise site. Just the bar is much higher. And of course, as I mentioned, the stakes are much higher. All right, so with that, I want to pass it on to Mari to talk about steps to supercharging your enterprise SEO content. Mari.
Thanks so much, Carlos. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and switch screens here really fast. So hang tight, everyone, and we should be good to go. Carlos, I can see you on my screen. Can you just give me a thumbs up if you can see it?
Can see you.
Awesome. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. All right, folks, so we're going to jump into, as Carlos mentioned, kind of the meat of this presentation, which are going to be the steps that we refer to as supercharging your enterprise SEO content. So the 5 steps really broken down here, and we'll go through each of these in more detail, are the following. So we're first going to be determining our topic. We'll get into what that looks like here next. You're also going to make sure that understanding your brand's audience is and remains top of mind. We're also going to talk a bit about identifying your competitors, implementing SEO best practices, and then finally how you might evaluate your performance as part of this larger 5-step program for supercharging your content. So as I mentioned, the first of the 5 here is going to be determining your topic. Many of you probably have direct keyword research or topic research experience, so you're familiar with any of the different tools or platforms that you've used. This is where that keyword research comes into play, kind of tying back to what Carlos mentioned as one of the biggest pieces that go into really determining and making sure that your content is aligned. And so where you're going to spend a lot of that initial part of this assembly line of creating a new piece of content or even optimizing is in the research. So you're going to really want to make sure that you've honed in on the primary keyword or primary topic for one individual piece of content. As you think about your sites, they're obviously sectioned off by different navigational structures. Maybe if you are a banking website, you've got retirement, you've got savings, you've got checking. All of those different categorizations are kind of their own individual trees, and you've got many branches that go off of that. So the keyword research and really focusing on determining the correct topic, where it aligns with the different navigational components of your site is always that very first step, because it will ultimately provide the most context and alignment with what's got the most traction in the SERP as we see it today. The second step, as I mentioned before, is understanding your audience. So you've determined your topic. You know that you want to write about, let's say, checking accounts. I'm just going to roll with the banking example here. Let's say we're talking about checking accounts. You're also going to want to make sure that you understand the difference between different variations of that search and what different variations of your topic maintain or rather garner different kinds of results from your audience. So in this example on your screen, you can see that we've got hockey sticks and mozzarella sticks, and they both have very different interest levels depending on which section, as well as the occupations of those doing their research. So something to keep in mind is, who is your audience? You need to make sure that who you're writing for and to actually aligns with how those individuals or that part of your audience is searching. And that can all be answered in your content, assuming you've done the work to align your main or primary topic. The third piece here is going to be identifying your competitors. So, okay, we've determined our topic. We know that our audience wants to be spoken to or have these kinds of questions answered within our content. That next step is going to be determining who are our competitors. What are we competing against as far as other kinds of content? What things should we be considering? So you would want to make sure that you are understanding exactly the layout of that topic, whether and depending on what kind of technology you currently leverage to do this research and figure out who your audience is and how they're finding you. You can also just Google anything and say, all right, if we're looking at checking accounts as writing for a piece of content, go ahead and search that in Google, see who shows up. It takes a little bit longer than, say, using any of the many SEO tools and platforms out there, but it's definitely worthwhile to get familiar with the breakdown of the SERP. So if you're starting from, if you're starting brand new or from a blank slate, go ahead and use Google. It's your friend, do your research. Otherwise, take advantage of the technology that your company uses in order to determine who your competitors are. That can really help solidify whether or not your content, as you've so far designed it, is really going to align with what's already ranking well. The fourth piece here is going to be implementing those SEO best practices. So I'd even like to remove the word SEO in terms of best practices. This is just in general content best practices. The Google algorithm and many of the different crawlers that are going to visit your site are intelligent enough to understand if you're not speaking in a way that a normal person, myself included, all of you, would actually read and want to do any of the research around this information. So back in the over decades ago of people doing things like keyword stuffing or just constantly repeating the same sentences or anything like that, really didn't take into account the value that you were supposed to be driving for your consumers. So as we think about general content best practices, it's having a solid structure. And at this juncture too, I would even recommend a standardized approach for your content in general. So you basically are going to want to follow the same structures for things like title tags, meta descriptions, and header tags. Title tags and header tags are an amazing opportunity to send a signal to Google, while meta descriptions don't send a illicit signal to Google. Your click-through rate does. So the better you can align your metadata, so again, these things like title tag, meta description, and headers, the better that you can align that with the research that you've done, the way that consumers are going to be looking for your content, the better off your content will be and the better it will perform. And I'm going to pause for just a second. I see that there's a question. Oh, sorry, Carlos, I'll let you handle that one. Thank you.
Yeah. We're recording this webinar and we'll share it. So yes, but yeah, thanks for your question.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so again, once you've gotten through all the first 3 steps of determining your topic, figuring out who your audience is, making sure that you've considered who your competitors are, you've got this skeleton, the structure for a piece of content, you're now going to make sure that you're implementing these SEO best practices or content best practices before you launch it. The final phase in this 5-step process for supercharging your content is evaluating your performance. This is an example of what the Conductor platform looks like in terms of evaluating your performance. I know many of you are using different tools or platforms. So in any way that you can report on or determine the performance of individual pages, just with a grain of salt, keep that in mind. It's going to look a little different. But here, this is an example of, let's say we launched a new piece of content and we're kind of monitoring it against our different metrics that we are considering for just that individual page. So we really need to make sure that as we make changes, we are making annotations. When did this change happen? Be mindful of the performance either up or down that happens since you've made either the launch of that page or those optimizations, because it really will help to determine if you're headed in the right direction. Maybe you have to go back a couple steps in the assembly line. Something's not quite clicking. What did we miss? What research didn't we quite get to? So evaluating your performance is a really significant piece of either duplicating your efforts if you do well, or kind of just reassessing what's being done so that you can make positive improvements. The next section, so number 5, I forgot to put the number, apologies everybody. We're going to go through an outline for the seamless content creation in this next couple of minutes. So what we're going to cover here is what it looks like to set your team up for success, kind of tying back to Carlos's earlier point, especially with enterprise content strategies. You're going to have a lot of stakeholders involved, maybe not even people that you necessarily would consider, but the marketing team in all capacity, everybody's got a little bit of a stake in the performance of your content. So that strategy is pretty inclusive, and you want to try and bring in as many people that are relevant as you can. We're going to talk about ways to get creative, and then finally review, measure, and refine, and with regards to kind of that overall baked out process. So when we talk about setting up your team for success, the first step is defining your team. Again, there are some obvious stakeholders here. We've got our copywriters, we've got our content managers, we've even got our director of marketing, right? It's kind of that trickle down effect. But you've got to also think about the other people who have stake in the success of your content. If they are the ones who upload the changes to the site or new pieces of content, if they're the dev team who are the only people who can make changes on your site, if it is the paid marketing team, well, what language are you using? What research did you do to launch this campaign? It probably seems a little insignificant because it's not perfectly aligned. But again, if you don't have a standardized or unified approach, your content is always going to be a little bit underperforming, or at least not as high performing as it could be if you were to bring in all of those relevant people. So you really want to make sure that you've defined your team and understand who are the different players in the space internally. You're also going to then want to set your goals. So once you've kind of determined who this team is, figure out who can contribute directly to things like the actual improvement of our organic traffic. What conversions, what meaningful conversions can we monitor to determine whether or not we're hitting these goals? And ultimately, what are we driving to? So again, this is where these conversations come into play. As we think back to that assembly line, those 5 steps in supercharging your content, think about your audience. Think about what we know of Google. Think about those best practices. Who is going to have any kind of impact in that process? And then finally, once you've gone through these first 2 steps, you're going to hold a kickoff meeting. I know everybody's probably groaning, oh, another meeting to add to the calendar, but think about it this way. It's really just an investment in the long term. You don't have to have these meetings frequently, but at least if you get everybody in the same room, and I say quotations around room because, you know, a lot of people are remote, but if we can get the same people in a conversation to align on the goals that you've set, to help evangelize for the reason that different people are stakeholders in this journey, you can essentially establish your own message, make sure that everybody's on the same page, and then you can determine a timeline and really start to contextualize an improvement in performance, as well as either new content or optimizations as a whole. We'll jump into this get creative portion. So this is where we really talk about, brainstorming here. So when you think about this meeting that you might want to hold as an example, or to help kind of facilitate these conversations, you're going to want to share what in your mind as content leaders in your space, what might a brief look like for a new piece of content or an optimized piece of content. Have that as an example for this team, and then let them run with it. Let's see what they can come up with. Let's see what you can come up with. You're going to want to establish a baseline with that initial brief so that everybody, again, has a bit more awareness about where to start and what should we be looking for. I often find that we get a lot more buy-in with teams where there's a template for them to work off of versus saying like, here's a blank space, go forth and prosper. So set up space for that creativity to happen. And as a result, what you're going to be able to do is establish a communication channel that allows for people to provide direction, creative direction, as well as additional improvements to your content format. But if you're not having those conversations, a lot of the really positive improvements that could be made don't end up happening. And then there we go, perfect. So like I said, we're going to talk about brainstorming. Then you hit the team with a content brief. So understand, and this is where like your copywriter and anybody who has any sort of influence on SEO are going to collaborate here, again, to set up that structure. And then that collaboration piece is really going to be where most of your stakeholders are brought into the conversation. Some enterprise companies have different design teams, which are totally separate from the content team, which are separate from the organic team, which are separate from the dev team. So you have a lot of people that ultimately, before you can finally execute on a piece of content or even a strategy, need to understand the reasoning behind all of this and just get a sense of, oh, right, that's why we do that. Or I don't really get that. Can you explain it? But if you don't have an opportunity to have those conversations, again, those questions don't get asked. People just keep going on with the status quo, and you lose out on opportunity to make better content. As Carlos reminded us earlier, right? Content is king. We want to make sure that it is doing all that it can to attract the correct audience and improve conversions on our site. And then finally, that last piece I was talking about here. So review, measure, refine. So once we've kind of gone through that execution piece, what you're going to want to do, as we talked about before, is make sure that you are reviewing everything that you have put together. So it's like final piece, kind of like, when models rock a runway, there's always somebody who's getting the lint off their clothes or making sure their hair is in the right place. It's kind of like that, just really making sure before you are pushing this content out into the world, you are putting also your best foot forward in that regard. And then as we talked about before, so measurement is going to be really key. This is where determining your goals are going to be extremely significant, because if you didn't have a goal that you decided on, you're not really going to have anything to benchmark against. So if we didn't have a goal of, say, let's increase organic performance 7% the next 6 months, but we didn't establish how we were going to accomplish that, that's kind of a moot point. Like, we haven't really done much to get that done. So we just need to make sure that in those earlier processes I talked about, we have established what our goals are, and that's where we come back on the measurement side and determine how we're doing against those goals. And then should there be any negative or positive performance as a result of any measurement we've been doing, we're going to focus on refinement. So this is where we take those positive insights, inject them into things that are maybe underperforming. If things are underperforming, we make adjustments. This is a little bit of a long game sometimes, especially for companies that don't necessarily have a ton of content out there yet, but are looking to enter into this space. So just be really mindful and positive, because if you're doing the right stuff, your content will rank, your content strategy will serve you well, and you'll be able to work really closely with a ton of different stakeholders who previously you might not have realized had influence on your strategy. So yeah, just wanted to leave you all with that. And as kind of a final note here, the key takeaways just from this is that, as I mentioned, your content will perform better as long as you are really thinking about the injection points you have to making sure you're writing for your own audience and that you are doing your best to perform that keyword or topic research. Another key way, key takeaway here that I mentioned is just the overall agility. If more stakeholders are involved in conversations more frequently, you will not have to wait as long to get things done. So you can be more agile. And then one of the second to last takeaways here is just make sure that you are keeping SEO in mind. Google only cares about what's good for consumers. They'll not care if they have to rank your site poorly because you haven't aligned with best practices or you're speaking in the voice of your audience. So really make sure that you're considering SEO as kind of a pillar to creating content. And then finally, make sure that you're able to effectively measure and report on your content performance. And that starts by having definitive goals. So just make sure that those conversations are frequently brought up. Don't be afraid to report that something isn't doing well. It's a great opportunity to fix it. So this is just a great call out here for communication for the team. And that's it on my side. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and kick it back over to you, Carlos.
Awesome, Marty. Thank you. That was phenomenal. Thank you very much. Great tips here. So I'm going to take it back and talk a little bit more about scaling content production, right? I think Mary gave us a great set of tips and things to do to produce content smoothly. But I want to kind of take it a step further and talk about how we're going to create this machine, how we're going to get it to crank up and scale really and make it repeatable, right? So for I'm just making sure you're seeing my screen. Okay, so how to scale content production. So, well, first you need to decide how you're going to create the content, right? And it's always the decision, is it an in-house model or is it an outsourced model, right? In-house has its advantages. You have way more control, but the downside of that is you have to lay out a lot of infrastructure to be able to find the writers and editors and and just manage the whole team that is going to produce all that content. Now you can go on the outsource route, which you're going to give a little bit more control to your partner, but could forget about laying all that infrastructure because the partner has already laid that infrastructure for you. So it can work very well. We have also seen hybrid models. You have your in-house team for certain particular things, and then you have your outsourced partner for other things. So, but again, you need to decide what model is the one that fits better for your enterprise. Then after you decide the model, then you want to develop your process and the infrastructure. Again, if you're going in-house, so you need to think, okay, how I'm going to hire my writers and my editors, how I'm going to train them. And then when after they're trained, how we're going to execute on the content, how I'm going to manage them and how I'm going to even pay them. A lot of people don't think about these things, but it's very important that you have these infrastructure laid out. It's not just going to internet or to Upwork and find a freelancer. There's more to it than that, right? And especially when you're talking about enterprise level SEO, you're talking about maybe dozens or even hundreds of freelancers. So it's very important that you think about this process and lay it out and develop it and design it before starting to produce the content. Now, if you go the outsource route, you still need to think about some of these things, but the vendor will likely take a big chunk of these activities. But you still have to think, okay, how I'm gonna find my vendor, how I'm gonna manage my vendor, how I'm gonna communicate with them, and how the whole process is gonna work. Now, after you have thought of that, or at the same time as you think of how you're gonna produce the content, you need to develop a well thought out style guide, right? Or a set of instructions that your writers and your team are going to follow. And again, at the beginning, I was talking about consistency, about brand, about tone of voice. It's very, very important that this is well thought out, well developed, and it's communicated, and your team is trained on it, because it's going to save you time making sure that all your content is published ready and you don't have to go through many iterations. So it's going to make your process way more efficient. You're going to produce really good quality content. Set a monthly publishing goal and editorial calendar, right? That's going to help you. It's going to be your roadmap of your content process, of your content goals, right? So you have to develop that schedule so everybody is on program, right? And develop a repeatable production process, right? The research briefs that Mary was mentioning, then you go to write and you go to edit and then you publish, but then you test it, you iterate and then improve, right? It's not a one and done process. you have to keep refining this process all the time. And at the beginning, it's going to be difficult, it's going to be painful, but as you get more pieces of content through the process, you're going to keep getting better at it. So the SEO, as we know, is a process of iteration and getting better because it's always changing. All right, so let's talk about a few common mistakes that you want to make sure you stay away from. So there's four I want to mention. There's a number of them, but I think these four are some of the most relevant. So one is overexpanding instead of optimizing. So sometimes it's very tempting to just create new topics, explore new keywords, and go after new opportunities. But sometimes it's just better to focus on optimizing the ones that we already have, and the ones that already have some traffic, the ones that already have some good backlinks, right? It's like the analogy would be like doing 3-point shooters or just shooting from under the basket, right? So you're optimizing your existing pieces is the low-hanging fruit. So make sure you're not overstretching yourself and trying to produce new content all the time, and you neglect optimizing your existing content, because you might have faster results, better results, focusing on optimizing first, then not optimizing your channels. What happens is that sometimes some companies might want to just put everything on the SEO team and everything on the organic side, but it's important to look at all the different channels, right? Also, you have your paid media channel, and you have your social media channel, and then you have all these different channels in your marketing strategy, and you need to make sure you put the right amount of resources to each channel. It's not going all in on one channel and neglecting the other. So making sure that you're not just fully focusing on only one channel while neglecting the rest. Then not optimizing page templates, because you have so many sites and so many pages. You need to make sure you also have good templates for your different pages, and also be updating those templates all the time. And every time that you produce new content, making sure that that new piece of content follows your template. So it's all about keeping your templates optimized. And last but not least, neglecting off-page SEO. So there's still backlinks that you need to pursue and that you should be pursuing. And all your technical SEO is important, that your load speed is up, that all your user experience factors are up to the game, right? So it's not just about the on-page SEO, but also the off-page SEO. So not forgetting about that, another mistake that can be avoided. Okay, so I think we have a little bit of time to go over some tips and tricks for growing your organic traffic at a scale. So tip number one, optimize decaying content. So it's very important that you set alerts on your content that has been out there for a while, and just optimize it. Sometimes it's as simple as just refreshing the publish date, right? Or just adding new information. So if you're doing, best cars of 2020, so of course you want to do the best cars of 2022, right? So just refreshing your content, make sure that you monitor your older content and always be refreshing your content. So here we have an example of a page that decay by 50%, right? And then we have to put some work back into it, and now finally it's starting to pick it up. But the problem is that we neglected this page for too long. Then we went and the traffic dropped, and then we have to go and optimize it again and refresh it. We shouldn't let it go that far. But all I'm trying to say is you need to make sure that you're always refreshing your page, your older pages. Then, focus on a cluster strategy. The world of just focusing on keywords is behind. It's all about creating pillar content, topic cluster, keyword clusters, right? Because it's going to help you to go deep in one topic. Also send signals to Google that you have authority in one topic. So, focus on a cluster strategy. And look at your Search Console data. Is gold. I know there is some debate about how good is that and how real and how accurate is Search Console data, but there is still some gold that you can find there. I love this one. Those pages that are ranking in the second page of the SERP, maybe there's a lot of opportunity of instead of trying to rank for new keywords, try to get these pages to rank in the first page, right? What can you do to get them from, you know, position 5 to position 4 to position 3, right? Is there an opportunity for that? I'm not saying that that is easy, but there might be an opportunity that is easier to tackle than trying to rank for a new set of keyword clusters. Also, is there opportunities for optimizing your conversion rate, right? You may have a page that have high impressions but low click-through rate, right? So is that better than producing a new piece of content? Or, you know, the Google console is going to give you data about some issues in your site when under the coverage issues. There's a number of issues that are going to appear there. So if you tackle those ones, you can have also good impact on your traffic. And last but not least, so keyword gap analysis. You know, can you look at your competitors? What keywords are they ranking for, and where are some keyword opportunities? I know some tools, some SEO tools have a feature that is gap analysis that is going to help you identify which new keywords you can try to rank for that you are not covering. But, you know, again, as I said before, I would do that after I have focused on optimizing my existing pages, not, you know, try to avoid that overstretching. So yeah, I think that's it for the material. Again, the takeaways about enterprise SEO is all about size, right? Size matters. So if you have thousands of pages, you're likely have to apply the techniques or you know, tackle your SEO as an enterprise level SEO. You know, you need to create processes that are going to allow you to scale. So creating the processes and the automation and scalability and repeatability are going to be key for enterprise SEO. And of course, quality content is key. Because you're an enterprise, the bar is going to be so much higher. So you cannot afford not to produce good quality content. And lastly, collaboration and buy-in is going to be very important if you want to be able to move fast, right? You have to take into account all the needs of the different stakeholders and get their buy-in early on in the process. So with that, you know, we can move into some Q&A. So let's see, what do we have here in terms of questions? I'm going to start sharing my screen, go to a Q&A. All right. And I think I have a question for Mary. Mary, so how is Conductor different from other SEO tools? You're mute, Mary.
I'm muted, of course. Sorry about that. Yeah. That's a really great question. And there are so many tools out there. I think a differentiator just in the language is that Conductor is an enterprise SEO technology, often referred to as a platform. So the biggest difference there is that there is a lot more in one place than often you'd have to cobble together with a number of different tools. I think probably many of you on this call use a variation of a bunch of different tools. The value, one of the biggest value components of Conductor is that so much of what you'd have to try and bring together from a bunch of different tools are actually all in one place, from site crawling functionality to technical SEO, to content performance assessment and keyword research. All of that is available within one platform. So at a minimum, the benefit of Conductor is that you don't have to do as much work to get to the data that matters. In terms of, especially as we're thinking about content, making those optimizations, creating a strategy, or generating that new content. But I'd be happy to connect with anybody offline as well. If you want to find me on LinkedIn or shoot me a note, we can certainly talk more about what you're using and what the value might be in either adding Conductor, getting doing away with some of the older tools that you've been using. But yeah, great question. Thank you for that.
Awesome. Thank you, Mary. I have another one for you, and then I have another one for me. But since you're already jamming, so I don't want to, you know, break the momentum. So, what metrics would you recommend us to track to understand our content performance?
It's a great question. It does a little bit depend on the analytics that you're using. I would say I don't have the number off the top of my head, but I know a lot of people are using Google Analytics. So the metrics that are extremely valuable there are really just based on the conversions that are important to you. You know, with analytics, you can set up a number of different triggers to let you know which conversions are happening, what kind of traffic, the number of visits that you're receiving on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis. So the metrics that matter, it's a little bit difficult to give you a recommendation without knowing your business. But in general, you want to understand the basic conversions that are happening. If it's a purchase now, if it's a get more information, if it's anything like that, in addition to your main metric of either visits or sessions, depending on which analytics you're using. So you always want to make sure you have context to that level of engagement.
Awesome. Thank you, Mary. So I got one here from the audience on this. I'm going to take this one. Is there a recommended time frame that pages should be refreshed for decaying content, or is it monitored on an individual basis? So I think you should set alerts for all of your pages, and especially the money makers, right? Like the 80-20 rule, you're going to have 20% of the pages that produce 80% of your good traffic, right? So those are the ones that you want to keep an eye on. And maybe you cannot, I like to do content audits, right? Every quarter, every 6 months, you do a content audit, look at all the sites, what changes, any dramatic changes that are happening, and it's just good SEO hygiene or good content hygiene, right? But also you want to monitor at least on a monthly basis, any dramatic change in your traffic, right? Depending on your industry or on your site, you can have certain volatility, but with enough history, what kind of volatility is expected and what would be something out of the normal. Now, after a Google algorithm update, you should look at your site, right? So every time there is an update, you should have a schedule of just looking at your report and making sure there is no big changes, any dramatic changes. And also, I would suggest having an SEO audit, but especially keep an eye on your money-making pages, which are the ones that, can have a bigger impact if they were to either reduce or increase their traffic. Okay, so question, I think for both of us, Mary, what tools can we use for keyword gap analysis? So, and I don't know if Conductor has something that would cover that or will help people identify keyword opportunities.
Yeah, so again, that's one of those areas where my answer a little bit depends on my experience with Conductor, being that it is an enterprise tool that is included in the platform. So that's obviously my go-to, but I know that I have access to it, so it's a little different. Depending on the size of your company, depending on the budget you have to invest in tools that cost money, I would say, to start, like one of the cheaper options, and it doesn't have much like beyond the initial functionalities of research, but SEMrush is a great tool. I believe there are at least limited free trials or components of that technology or tool rather, excuse me. But that is one that I recommend because we at Conductor actually integrate with SEMrush's entire index on top of a bunch of other data. So I know for a fact that that's really solidified information. There's also a number of ways to just like go through and do your analysis just by looking on the SERP. I mean, that's not a very scalable way to do it, but if again, you're starting from a place where you don't have the budget to invest in that space, or you haven't yet brought on other tools, just getting familiar with the SERP for a specific topic or a handful of topics can be really powerful, excuse me. So that's usually my kind of start the process response there.
Yeah, I definitely, I was going to mention SEMrush. I think is very popular. And yeah, I think there's access to some free features. So yeah, but there is a number of tools out there. But again, I'm familiar with SEMrush, so I can speak to that. And I know Conductor is a very, very high caliber tool as well. So maybe you can start with those two and look at other options as well. How do you maintain the quality of content when scaling content production? I'll chime in, and Mary, if you want to add anything, feel free. But this is, I'm just going to start by saying this is not easy. And a big part of that is all about the iteration in the process. So to be able to maintain that quality at a scale, you need to first set the bar of what quality is, right? What is going to be your bar to measure your quality? And then from that, you need to calibrate and go from maybe a small batch of content and then see, are we hitting that quality? If we're not, what is it missing? and calibrate again until you're happy with the quality. Now you crank up the machine, and then you get it to produce, and then you get to scale the content. And after a while, you should be auditing, because again, this is freelancers, these are writers. This is not a perfect science. So with time, people get comfortable, or things start to decay. So you need to revisit that process every quarter, or every time there is a problem, right? But at the beginning, set the bar, set the expectation, calibrate, knowing that there are going to be kinks to work out of the process, iterate, and keep tackling until you find your strategy, and then you can go on cruise mode. I don't know, Mary, do you have anything to add to that?
You pretty much touched on it. I think the only thing I would call out, just again, we're thinking about this in terms of enterprise, but I know some of you are kind of on the cusp in terms of your companies where you might fall exactly into that enterprise categorization. So if you're curious about how do we keep track of what needs to be fixed, again, I'm really big on categorization or grouping together different parts of your site. So if you're lucky enough to have a big enough team where different people own different parts of the site, you have somebody that kind of oversees the performance at scale, and then you have your individual team members who are responsible for monitoring those different sections. Again, I know I speak to that in a perfect world, as if everybody has enough headcount to do those kinds of things, but that can certainly be a way to scale that in the long term, depending on the number of people you have supporting you.
Awesome. And I think we have time for one last one, and I have here, does the same SEO rules apply to enterprise SEO? And the answer is yes. So the same SEO fundamentals, quality content, quality backlinks, user experience, like all the good stuff about having great SEO. Now, the difference is size. So you have to design everything with scale in mind. So you have to design processes that can help you scale, because, doing everything manually one by one is going to be very hard. So, again, same fundamentals, but all about a scale, or about, dealing with different stakeholders. So, it's going to be a big endeavor. Any initiative around SEO is going to be a big endeavor. So you need to plan for that. So I think that's really the big difference. Yeah, I think
one
that's
thing I'll just add to that. This is kind of like a basic analogy, but if your house is on fire, it doesn't matter the size of your house. You need to handle that.
Yeah.
And so I think of it that way with SEO. Like if you don't have a strong SEO foundation or a strong technical foundation, like you can think of it as your house kind of being on fire, and no one cares the size of your house if it's on fire at all. So that's kind of the way I like to think about it.
I love it. Well, that's a great way to end the webinar, Maria. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Great analogy. And yeah, don't let your house go on fire. Yeah, but no, thank you very much, Maria. You were fantastic. Conductor, you guys have an amazing tool. So yeah, well, thanks everybody for joining us in the webinar. And well, good luck with your enterprise SEO. Have a great rest of the summer.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Carlos.
Thanks, everyone.